Tonight, we honor a First Lady's legacy.
Oh, how many years?
Forever.
But you're part of the community. I mean, you were,
I hope.
And that's important.
Very important.
Barbara Bush played an important role, not only for the nation, but for Maine, the place she considered her second home. An outpouring of respect and affection from Mainers makes it clear she was part of the fabric of the community.
Just knowing her, you learn a great sense of humor.
Someone that you would hope that your daughter would grow up to be.
Tonight, we take a look at the mark she left on American history.
Guts and grace comes to my mind as she was always gracious. There was never a scandal.
And the legacy she leaves behind. This evening, we want to spend some time remembering Barbara Bush. Good evening, I'm Pat Callahan.
And I'm Amanda Hill. The former First Lady passed away Tuesday evening, just a couple of days after we learned she was in failing health and refusing further medical treatment. President
and Mrs. Bush spent more than 70 summers at the Bush family compound at Walker's Point in Kennebunkport. She played a pivotal role in her Maine community as well as her country.
When did you have your appendix out? Oh, well. You'll be dancing the light tango tomorrow. You will.
Over the years, it became a familiar sight. Barbara Bush visiting hospitals in Maine, often reading to children. It was a way of combining two of her passions, kids and literacy. Mrs. Bush told News Center she chose literacy as her cause while her husband was running for president because it affects everything people want to do.
I wanted a cause that would cost no government money necessarily, that had to do with the volunteer corps, and that would help the most Americans possible.
The Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy has distributed tens of millions of dollars in grants. The former First Lady also gave her name and support to Maine's only children's hospital, founded in 1995, the Barbara Bush Children's Hospital at Maine Medical Center in Portland.
Good. A little harder, please.
In her extraordinary position as wife of one president and mother of another, Barbara Bush was fiercely loyal to her family, even as she admitted that she was skeptical of her son George W.'s prospects.
I told him he couldn't win, if that's what you mean. I told him he couldn't win as governor, too.
She was born in New York and lived much of her life in Texas, but Barbara Bush's ties to Maine were always strong. In 2012, she and her husband told us about why they loved their summers at Walker's Point in Kennebunkport.
Yet you always come back here. What makes it so special?
George's roots are from here.
Well, this place is right ocean on three sides, and it's very, very peaceful. And so we like coming here for, how many years?
Forever.
But you're part of the community. I mean, you really
I hope.
are.
I hope.
And that's important to you.
Very important.
Faith leaders, elected officials, and just average citizens walked into St. Martin's Church in Houston, Texas, while Mrs. Bush lies in repose.
News Center's Chris Costa is in Houston this evening. And Chris, we're seeing all kinds of people united in their respect.
Pat and Amanda, that's right. We've seen kind of a wide spectrum of emotions today. We've spoken to a number of people as they've come out of the doors of St. Martin's Church. Some are sad when facing the realization that, yes, Mrs. Bush has indeed passed away. But there are many others reflecting on the wonderful memories and lessons they've learned from the former First Lady.
Among the thousands of people paying their respects to Mrs. Barbara Bush, hundreds from Texas, some with connections to Maine.
That was where my husband and I honeymooned.
Houston resident Laura Parker knows Maine, from Deer Isle to Kennebunkport, even Walker's Point.
But while we were there looking, somebody let us use their binoculars and we could see them outside. She was just such a gracious woman and just made everybody feel at ease around her.
Buses transporting dozens, crowds of strangers becoming friends.
Talking, we've developed the Satellite Sisters relationship, and so we rode the bus together, we walked through together, and now I guess we're going to ride the bus back to the Second Baptist Church together. This is a good time to share our individual stories and to talk to each other and look at each other. It's exciting.
From average citizens to dignitaries like Texas Governor Greg Abbott, everyone paying their respects to Mrs. Bush. Stories of the enforcer, echoing the sentiments from people in Maine, a tough woman, filled with compassion.
And they're very average people. There's no air about them whatsoever.
The grace of the former First Lady reflected in today's ceremonies.
Very serene, calm, you know, just, it was beautiful.
Now, tomorrow's private services begin here at St. Martin's Church at 11 a.m. It's primarily for family, friends, and close relatives of the family. Now, former President George H.W. Bush made his first public appearance since the announcement of his wife's passing today. In a picture tweeted by family spokesperson Jim McGrath, you can see the 41st president saying goodbye to his wife. Now, after tomorrow's services, Mrs. Bush will be buried at the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library on the campus of Texas A&M University in College Station, about 90 miles north of here. Many of Mrs. Bush's close friends from Maine are planning on attending those private services tomorrow, including Maine Medical Center President Rich Peterson and Senator Susan Collins, who has visited the Bush family in Kennebunkport for more than 20 years. We are expecting to speak with Senator Collins when she attends those private funeral services tomorrow. She's one of only 3 senators from outside of Texas who was invited. There will be nearly 1,500 people attending those services tomorrow. So far tonight, as of 4:30 Central Time, police estimated about 3,000 people had come through the doors here at St. Martin's Church. Live in Houston, Texas, I'm Chris Costa. Pat, back to you.
Thank you, Chris. A lot of people will remember the former First Lady for her quick, self-deprecating wit.
Hi, you're gorgeous. You do.
Get new glasses.
She was a frequent visitor to the Ogunquit Playhouse, as seen in this clip from 2015. Humor and grace were Barbara Bush trademarks.
In the days since Mrs. Bush passed, Mainers have demonstrated an outpouring of support for the Bush family. Their summer home in Kennebunkport is a popular destination for locals and tourists alike. People stop by Ocean Avenue to try to get a glimpse of family members. That home is empty now, but people from all over have been visiting Walker's Point to pay tribute to Mrs. Bush. Chris Rose reports.
A rock dedicated to Mrs. Bush's husband, President George H.W. Bush, overlooking the family compound, now adorned with flowers and mementos in honor of Barbara Bush.
And we were just always admiring the family all the time for their dignity, which we don't see a lot of in politics today. So it makes a family like this even stand out more.
Each year, people from all across the country and across the globe come by to view and take photos of the iconic Bush home nestled against the coast and the ocean. A day after Mrs. Bush's passing, people felt drawn to the site.
I wanted to see her, you know, her summer home where she spent a lot of time and had a lot of happy memories.
Coming out here and seeing the place, it brings a tear to your eye, but she wouldn't want that. She would want people to be happy and do something good in her name.
Mrs. Bush was passionate about literacy and helping kids to read. She was also compassionate, helping sick children through her work with the place that bears her name, the Barbara Bush Children's Hospital at Maine Medical Center. This little girl stopped by with a thank you note.
It's really sad that she died, and because I felt like maybe I should write a letter to her, and it says, "Thank you for being a wonderful First Lady."
But it was not all sadness outside the family home.
I feel happy in a way because I know she had a lot of wonderful times up here. I mean, I've heard stories of her going into downtown Kennebunkport shopping among the locals and everything, and very down to earth, not putting on any airs, very humble.
Chris Rose, News Center, Maine.
And still to come tonight, a major part of Barbara Bush's legacy is that children's hospital that bears her name.
I just smiled because I got to see all of it firsthand.
We'll take a look at how patients, doctors, and nurses are honoring the former First Lady when we come back.
this is the kind of person she was. She was just so happy to do anything for children. And it's something, her cause was something that no one could be offended by.
The former First Lady had a true talent for inspiring the people she met, including the many patients she visited at the Barbara Bush Children's Hospital in Portland.
As a way to honor Mrs. Bush, current and former patients came together for a special tribute this week. Lindsay Mills reports.
A moment away from the scans, treatments, and tests.
I'm sad that she passed away.
To honor a woman who helped the patients of the Children's Hospital in Portland. 13-year-old Gabe Beazus has cystic fibrosis and has stayed at the hospital more than a dozen times.
I wish I could meet her.
Gabe never met the former First Lady, who was known to visit the hospital often, but her optimistic energy was evident in the everyday work of the hospital that bears her name.
Say you're not having a good day, like people here will like cheer you up like super fast.
Her humor, her resiliency, her being the matriarch of the family, and through personal interaction, I just smiled because I got to see all of it firsthand.
Jerry Michelson is chairman of Maine Medical Center. He says Mrs. Bush's life's work and legacy will live on at the hospital. If you stop and look close enough at these tiles, you'll find the one she made, pearls and all. Wednesday, patients and doctors and nurses created a different display, a banner adorned with words of gratitude for a woman who inspired so many, and a guest book quickly filling with messages from those who are thankful for a safe and loving place to heal.
She deserves it.
Lindsay Mills, News Center, Maine.
We've been hearing so many stories about Mrs. Bush, and Pat, you've actually spent some time with them over the years.
That's true, and of course people keep talking about Barbara Bush's kindness, but there was a toughness as well. Her family called her the enforcer, and the one who made sure everybody towed the line and met their responsibilities, because someone's got to do that. In the political sphere, she was also the keeper of the grudges. I saw this firsthand a few years ago when talking with the Bushes at Walker's Point. I mentioned that I felt, as many did, that had Ross Perot not been a third-party candidate in 1992, that George H.W. Bush would have defeated Bill Clinton and won re-election. The president simply shrugged and said, well, maybe. Mrs. Bush's eyes, on the other hand, flashed, and her words and body language made it clear that she knew Perot had kept her husband from a second term, and 20 years later, she still had not forgotten.
Well, she won't forget. Still to come on A First Lady's Legacy, we look deeper into Mrs. and President Bush's love story.
Wherever there is George H.W. Bush, there is Barbara Bush there, right by, holding his hand, or pretty close to ready to hold his hand.
It's a story that played out partially with the family home in Kennebunkport.
Mother said to the doctor, "Do you want to know why George turned out the way he turned out?" And Mother says, "Because I drank and smoked when I was pregnant with him."
Mrs. Bush's son, former President George W. Bush, says his mother was feisty to the end.
Mrs. Bush is one of just two First Ladies to have also been the mother of a president. She is also the last First Lady to have been a stay-at-home mom.
Bill Green visited the George and Barbara Bush Center at the University of New England, where the Bushes have been personally involved for more than a decade. Gives us a closer look at Mrs. Bush's role in history.
Born into wealth, Barbara Pierce was 19 when she married a future president and ended up spending more than half her life in the public eye.
She was the model of grace and dignity,
but also of humility. She wasn't looking for the limelight. And so when they were here on campus and we would have big lectures and that sort of thing, she never wanted to be out front.
10 years ago, the Bushes established the George and Barbara Bush Center here at UNE, which houses the Bush Legacy Collection. It tells the story of the Bush family's time in Maine with memorabilia such as Mrs. Bush's famous fake pearls.
As somebody who was able to guide a very strong family despite enormous pressures, dozens of moves when children were young, the death of a young child. So again, just, you know, an unbelievable rock of competence and a political partner in a way that maybe is the last of her generation.
Mrs. Bush immersed herself in civic work, particularly literacy and health care. In politics, she supported her husband, but also expressed her own opinion.
Guts and grace comes to my mind as she was always gracious. There was never a scandal connected to Barbara Bush during her time as First Lady. But at the same time, nobody would ever accuse her of being a shrinking violet.
Ranked 10th in popularity among First Ladies, she will be remembered for showing character and being herself.
Among the many brave things that I'm sure Barbara Bush did, most of which I probably don't even know about, she didn't dye her hair. That may not seem like a big deal, but for women in public life who are on TV all the time, that is a very big deal. And I'm so glad that she made that choice.
Barbara Bush was a power behind the throne, a trusted confidant. As a wife and mother of presidents, we may not see another woman like her.
Part of spending a summer in Kennebunkport meant having the chance to see Mr. and Mrs. Bush out around town. The former first couple and the rest of the family would often stop by places like Mabel's Lobster Claw restaurant or Chick's Marina. News Center's Justin Wojtkowski talked with people who ran some of the Bush's favorite businesses as they began to realize the former First Lady will not be back this summer.
She's a great woman.
Ashlyn Cabe helps manage Mabel's Lobster Claw. The quaint seafood spot is a favorite of the Bush family where they'd come for fried clams or order pies to go.
Every time a customer will come in, they'll be like, oh, do the Bushes come here? Where do they sit? And then we have this little shrine for them over here.
Places like this are where you'll find out Mrs. Bush was loved for her grace and the way she just made folks feel at ease.
I was actually really nervous to wait on them. Once I got there, they were just so comfortable to be around. Like it just, all those feelings went away. And I was like, wow, I waited on the Bushes.
And they come right here, get fueled up.
Charlotte Kincaid, who manages Chick's Marina, is a big fan of Mrs. Bush. The Bushes gas up their boat here often.
She's such a graceful lady, and she's a really good role model.
Mrs. Bush and her husband always try to blend in with their boat-going neighbors. It doesn't always work, and the Bushes were known to apologize.
They go out boating with a customer from here, and the only way you knew they were here was the Secret Service cars were blocking everything.
But the inconveniences people in Kennebunkport say were worth it. Mrs. Bush gave back with her time, her money, and her presence.
They actually attended Josh works there, they attended his wedding.
There is gratitude in Kennebunkport tonight for a woman who will be missed this summer a lot.
Maine has been a really special place for that family, and we're really grateful to have them.
Dustin Wojtkowski, News Center, Maine.
As we've heard throughout the special, friends of the First Lady say she was down to earth and giving to everyone.
There are people who know the Bushes in different ways, but loved Mrs. Bush all the same. Stephen Spielenhauer and his wife first met the Bushes in Kennebunkport the summer after they left the White House. He says Barbara Bush always worried about others before herself and treated everybody with the same generosity, even those who worked for her. Scarborough resident Paul Beeler agrees. He used to work in the Secret Service during George Bush's presidency and at one point became Mrs. Bush's personal driver. He joked that most of their conversations were confidential, but that he's grateful for her friendship and says she will be missed.
Just the nature of her treating people on an equal basis.
She made people feel very much at ease when you talk to her. Almost like within 10 minutes of talking with her, you would think you were friends forever.
Steve Spielenhauer is going to be attending Mrs. Bush's private funeral tomorrow in Houston with his wife.
The love former President George H.W. Bush shared with his wife was evident to everyone who knew them.
And since Mrs. Bush's death, many people have expressed concern for the former president, but he released a statement to try to put everybody's minds at ease. In it, President Bush says he knew Barbara was the most beloved woman in the world. He continues, saying he has faith that she's in heaven and knows life will go on. Wrapping up the message, he says, cross the Bushes off your worry list.
Their home in Kennebunkport, Walker's Point, has been in that family for generations, so the Bushes have been a part of that area for a long time.
And as Tori Ryden shows us, it provided a backdrop for a special Maine love story, one that started more than 70 years ago.
Here, Poppy and Barbara Bush, married couple from Yale, use it for their combination living room bedroom that's right for entertaining, right for living.
The year 1948, Barbara and George Bush featured in a commercial for the Bates Textile Mill, promoting a new line of curtains and bedspreads.
And notice how the draperies give the room a rich look on a collegiate budget.
Married and in college, the young Bushes representing the target audience, helping a Maine company thrive.
Some days they get haddock, sometimes they get swordfish. Whatever was here, lobster meat.
Sonny Hutchins has run Port Lobster for most of the past 63 years. He caddied for the president's grandfather and played regularly with 41. He says Barbara Bush often picked out the fish herself.
Very nice. She's a great lady. If you talk to either one of them for a minute or two, they'd make you feel welcome, make you feel like you'd known them all your life. Very easy to talk to.
She's pretty much down to earth and amazing.
Lisa Mills also has a special Barbara Bush bond. She's a singer. Yes, just to know him. From Walker's Point to the White House, they've performed at Bush functions for the past 15 years. She's also shared dog walks on the nearby beach with the former First Lady. But what really grabbed her was the handwritten sympathy card after her husband died.
Expressing how she's been thinking about me, and then I reached out to Gene Becker, Chief of Staff, and I just wanted to say thank you to Mrs. Bush for, taking time to write me this note, and then they invited me over to the house just to give me a hug.
A moment that helped her heal, a Barbara Bush moment she will hold on to forever. In Kennebunkport, Tori Ryden, News Center, Maine.
And there's more to come on a First Lady's legacy.
Mrs. Bush was a matriarch of our nation, not just of her family. She really is somebody that we can all look up to and strive to be as mothers.
Coming up, we visit the garden dedicated to Barbara Bush, a place which honors her and her dedication to family.
The other memory I'll always have of Barbara Bush was when we dedicated a garden in her memory, or in her honor, I should say, in Kennebunkport. And it was a surprise. And she arrived, and she didn't have on her trademark pearls, and she had just come from the hairdresser. And she gave us all a very hard time about that.
Barbara Bush famously said, at the end of your life, you will never regret not having passed one more test, not winning one more verdict, or not closing one more deal. You will regret time not spent with a husband, a friend, a child, or a parent.
As News Center's Beth McAvoy shows us, her dedication to family couldn't be more evident than at that small garden in Kennebunkport.
Here are her kids. Her mismatched kids, they're even mismatched here. She often wore mismatched kid shoes, and this is her favorite book. Pride and Prejudice. And here's her iconic floppy hat. That was just part of her pizzazz.
Nestled in the heart of Kennebunkport, where Mrs. Bush has spent every summer for the last 73 years, is a garden dedicated in her honor. Lovingly named after the nickname her grandchildren call her, Ganny's Garden was dedicated in 2011.
I hope you know how much this means to me. I'm just so grateful to all. I can't believe it.
Mrs. Bush's love and dedication to her family is evident in the garden. The initials of her 17 grandchildren have been engraven upon the garden stones, and 17 trees have taken root in their honor. Truly a political dynasty family that has taken root right here in southern Maine.
She's a strong, spirited, independent woman, someone that you would hope that your daughter would grow up to be.
As news of Mrs. Bush's passing spread across the community, residents of southern Maine stopped by the garden to pay their respects to the mother of 6.
On a personal level, I think she made me feel like it was all right to stay home and raise my 5 children and not have a wonderful career doing something else. I had a wonderful career, but that's what it was. Always be grateful to her example in that way.
But Barbara Bush did not always feel that way. After her children left home, Mrs. Bush admitted to falling into depression. She told USA Today back in 1989, "Suddenly, women's lib had made me feel my life had been wasted." Her husband helped her overcome her doubts and find satisfaction in seeing their children develop into productive adults.
Mrs. Bush was the matriarch of our nation, not just of her family. She really is somebody that we can all look up to and strive to be as mothers, and just someone that really showed care and love for her family and put it into everything she did.
In Kennebunkport, I'm Beth McAvoy, News Center, Maine.
That garden, a physical reminder of the legacy Mrs. Bush leaves behind, but as we've learned this week, she has left a lot of memories in the minds of people.
We thank you for being with us tonight to share the legacy of a First Lady and someone very special to Maine.
For all of us at News Center Maine, good night.